Cassandra Vale had just pulled the cane beyond Margaret Caldwell's reach when a guest pushed a cup of hot tea toward her. Margaret reached for the cane, causing the cup to tip. Hannah Brooks rushed forward and caught it. Boiling tea spilled across her wrist. But Margaret was not burned. Cassandra did not know that she had just dismissed the only person in the room who truly saw other people. The private dining room at Harbor House overlooked Boston Harbor. Ethan Caldwell was holding a 70th birthday celebration for his mother. He had invited Cassandra and several wealthy socialites whom he believed Margaret would enjoy meeting. Before the photographs were taken, Cassandra placed her purse on the chair beside Margaret and moved the cane into a corner so the picture would look cleaner. Hannah was still holding her reddened wrist, but Cassandra did not thank her. "You were standing too close to the table. That is why you caused all this confusion," she said. "Call the manager. We need a server who understands how to keep her distance." Hannah wrapped a cold towel around her wrist and did not argue. She placed the cup of tea in a safe position, then returned Margaret's cane to the right side of her chair. "Mrs. Caldwell, may I guide your hand toward the cane?" Margaret tilted her head slightly. "You asked before touching me?" "It is your hand." Only after Margaret agreed did Hannah gently guide it toward the handle before pulling away. She turned the cup so the handle faced right. "Your napkin is at the 10 o'clock position. Your water is at 2 o'clock. Your cane is directly beside the chair." Margaret paused. Her fingers touched the silver lighthouse pin on her jacket, as though she were searching for a memory that had not yet taken shape. One guest leaned close to Margaret and spoke each word loudly. "Do you need us to order for you?" "I lost my sight, not my hearing," Margaret answered dryly. Several people laughed uncomfortably. When Margaret asked to hear the menu, Hannah described the flavors and textures instead of deciding which dishes were appropriate for an older woman. Cassandra interrupted. "She will have the salmon, very little salt and no sauce." Hannah still faced Margaret. "Would you like the salmon, as Miss Vale ordered, or would you like to hear the other choices?" The corner of Margaret's mouth lifted. "I would like the cod with lemon sauce, and keep the normal amount of salt." Ethan witnessed everything, but he continued, reading Rosewood's quarterly report, which showed cost reductions that looked better than expected. He said nothing when Cassandra continued speaking about Hannah. Margaret heard her son's finger moving across the screen. She did not confront him immediately, but Ethan's silence was also a choice. Inside a room filled with people discussing compassion, he was still allowing social status to decide who deserved protection. "Servers today enjoy pretending they are professional caregivers," Cassandra said. Hannah's hand stopped when she heard the name Rosewood. She continued working, but her expression became more guarded. Inside her server's wallet, the edge of a document marked with code R17 became visible before a receipt covered it again. After the main course, the guests talked about their charity events. Margaret deliberately allowed her napkin to slide beside her foot. No one stopped speaking. Hannah approached, but did not place the napkin into Margaret's hand without permission. "Your napkin fell. Would you like me to pick it up, or bring you a clean one?" Margaret smiled. "A clean one, please. Thank you." At the end of the meal, Ethan quietly asked, "Of all the women here tonight, who do you think would be right for me?" Margaret turned toward the sound of Hannah thanking the kitchen staff. She raised a hand and pointed in that direction. "If you want to meet someone who sees people instead of their possessions, begin with her." The entire table became silent. Cassandra was the first to laugh. "She is joking. That woman is a server." Hannah stood upright, feeling every pair of eyes turn her into an object selected from a list. "I am a server, not a candidate in a search for a wife. I will not accept being chosen simply because I did my job correctly." Margaret did not defend her own words. She turned fully toward Hannah. "You are right. I apologize for speaking in a way that placed you in that position. I do not choose a wife for my son. I only wanted him to recognize a quality that money cannot purchase." The tension softened, but Hannah maintained her distance. She collected the final plate and prepared to leave the room. At that moment, Margaret touched the lighthouse pin again. 6 months ago, during the power outage on Beacon Street, her voice slowed. "Were you the person who told me that my water was at the 2 o'clock position?" Hannah stopped. She looked at the silver pin, and the memory returned immediately. A blind woman had become separated from her driver inside a frightened crowd. Her phone had lost power, and the lighthouse pin had fallen onto the sidewalk. Hannah had fastened it back onto the woman's jacket before guiding her to safety. "It was you," Hannah said quietly. Margaret recognized the rest of the memory through that voice, but Hannah only nodded and left the room. She did not mention that she had remained with Margaret for nearly 2 hours. She also said nothing about refusing the envelope of money Margaret had offered her. Ethan watched her leave. The gratitude forming inside him immediately collided with the suspicion he had carried since his broken engagement. He opened his phone and instructed the legal department to verify Hannah Brooks's identity. Only minutes later, the first record appeared on the dark screen. Hannah Brooks, nurse whose employment at the Rosewood Center was terminated for altering patient records. Ethan looked toward the door Hannah had just walked through, then turned toward his mother. A cold question formed inside his mind. Was Hannah a whistleblower who had suffered retaliation? Or had she known who Margaret was from the very beginning? Margaret listened as Ethan read the accusation from his phone, then tightened her hand around the cane. "Are you asking whether she knew who I was before she helped me?" On the way home, Margaret described the night of the power outage. Her driver had become separated from her on Beacon Street. Her phone had lost power, and the people passing by only apologized before continuing on their way. Hannah remained with her for nearly 2 hours, described every obstacle, arranged transportation, and refused the money Margaret offered. "I never even knew her name," Margaret said. "If she wanted access to our family, she could have left her phone number." His broken engagement had left Ethan suspicious. The following evening, he waited for Hannah at Harbor House after closing time. "I came to thank you for helping my mother," he said. "But why did you not mention that you once worked at Rosewood?" Hannah placed the final glasses on the shelf. "I came to your table to serve dinner, not to present my employment history." Ethan opened the report on his tablet. "The record says you altered patient care times and violated procedure." Hannah removed the R-17 report from her wallet. Only 3 nurses had been assigned to care for nearly 80 patients during that shift. Walter Hayes began choking, but no one responded to his call button in time. Hannah heard the sound, ran into his room, and provided emergency care. Rosewood listed nurses who were only available by telephone as though they were physically inside the facility, she said. "I reported the shortage. Julian Mercer ordered me to change the report, but I refused." Ethan examined R-17. This copy has no verification mark in the system. Do you have independent evidence? The original disappeared after I was dismissed. He looked at her. Did you know Margaret was my mother during the power outage? Are you using that incident to pressure the corporation? Hannah's expression became cold. She placed his business card on the table. I lost my job for telling the truth. I do not need to lose my dignity as well, just to convince a billionaire to believe me. She walked away, leaving Ethan alone among the empty tables. Hannah moved quickly beneath the harbor lights. Ethan's question made her understand that the corporation's reputation still mattered more than the dignity of someone who had already lost everything for speaking up. When Margaret learned what had happened, she did not soften her voice. You investigated Hannah as a threat before treating her words as a safety warning. Caution does not give you the right to humiliate an innocent person. Ethan ordered an internal audit of Rosewood. Julian arrived at Caldwell headquarters carrying a perfect set of records. The files showed full staffing, no serious incidents, and Hannah's dismissal completed according to procedure. Miss Brooks became resentful after being disciplined, Julian said. I saved Rosewood from bankruptcy. Without reducing costs, the entire facility would have closed. Ethan nearly accepted the conclusion until he noticed the name approving the final report. The same regional director who had authorized Hannah's dismissal had also supervised the audit. He closed the file. This review is not independent. Ethan hired an investigative team that reported directly to the board committee, then visited Rosewood without warning. Inside the rehabilitation hallway, one nurse was running between 3 call buttons. An elderly patient waited far too long beside a walker for assistance. Julian hurried toward him. This is only a temporary staffing shortage. Today's report shows 6 nurses on duty, Ethan said. Some are completing other assignments. Julian had an opportunity to tell the truth and begin correcting the problem. Instead, he continued insisting that every shift was fully staffed on paper. Ethan requested the building access records. 6 nurses were listed as present, but only 3 had scanned their badges when entering the facility. That night, Hannah received an unexpected call. Ava Patel, the night shift head nurse, spoke through tears. She admitted that she had joined Hannah in objecting to the staffing shortage, but withdrew her statement after Julian threatened to cancel her health insurance. Ava was raising 2 children. My silence cost you your job, Ava said. Hannah closed her eyes but did not blame her. Do not surrender anything until you have legal representation and protection as a whistleblower. I do not want you to restore my reputation by placing your children in danger. After receiving protection from retaliation, Ava gave Hannah a blue flash drive containing the original schedules, emails showing changes to the records, and a copy of R-17. Ethan met Hannah again. I doubted you because I was afraid of being used. That fear does not excuse the way I treated you. I apologize. Hannah had not yet returned his business card. I will provide the evidence only if the investigation focuses on the patients and does not turn me into a tool for repairing the Caldwell reputation. I agree. The investigation recovered an email Julian had sent at 2:14 in the morning. Delete Brooks's report before the quarterly inspection. Do not let Caldwell see the actual night shift ratio. Another hidden folder contained 17 safety warnings that had been marked as unsupported. The case was no longer a dispute between one nurse and one administrator. Rosewood's entire reporting system had been manipulated to conceal risks to patients. Ethan was preparing to sign Julian's suspension order when a technical specialist called him back to the screen. Security footage from the night Walter began choking had just been restored. The official record claimed that Julian had been present and directed the emergency response. But the video showed that Julian had already left the facility. The person who ran into Walter's room, opened his airway, and saved his life was not the administrator who had received the credit. It was Hannah. The security footage stopped on the image of Hannah providing emergency care to Walter. Ethan called a formal hearing attended by the board, Rosewood employees, patient representatives, and the press. Medical information would be released only with the patient's consent. Before Hannah spoke, Ethan stood. Rosewood belongs to Caldwell Health Group. Any wrongdoing there is also our responsibility. I will not place all the blame on a recently acquired facility simply to protect the corporation's name. Hannah was introduced as a former nurse and whistleblower, not as the woman a billionaire's mother had chosen. She described a shift in which only 3 nurses cared for nearly 80 patients, the moment she saved Walter, and the order to alter Report R-17. I accepted losing my job, she said, because if I had signed that lie, the next patient might not have survived to tell anyone what happened. Julian claimed that Hannah was a resentful former employee and that the cost reductions had prevented Rosewood from closing. Ethan ensured that Julian had legal counsel, received every document, and was allowed to respond to each allegation. The committee presented the evidence. The schedule on the blue flash drive listed 6 nurses, while the building access records confirmed that only 3 had entered. The security footage showed Hannah saving Walter. 2 versions of R-17 proved that the report had been altered. An email sent at 2:14 in the morning ordered staff to delete Hannah's report. Julian's bonuses had increased as staffing expenses decreased. The auditorium door opened. Ava Patel entered with the blue flash drive held tightly in her hand. I objected alongside Hannah. I withdrew my statement because I was afraid of losing health insurance for my children. My silence allowed her to be forced out of the profession. Hannah looked at her. A system built on fear turns good people into silent people. Our responsibility is to repair that system, not find someone with less power to blame. Walter Hayes then stepped forward voluntarily. With his permission, the security footage was played again. Hannah saved my life, he said. Julian was not present, despite what the official record claimed. Julian continued trying to remain calm. Every decision I made was intended to save the facility and protect most of the jobs. Ethan asked, then why did saving the facility require deleting a warning, altering a medical record, and blaming the person who prevented a patient from dying? Julian could not answer. After an independent investigation, the board removed him and transferred the evidence involving altered records and employee retaliation to health regulators and the professional licensing authorities. But Ethan did not leave the podium. I trusted attractive performance numbers without creating a direct path for caregivers to report concerns. My failure to know does not erase the responsibility that comes with leadership. He looked toward the nurses at the back of the auditorium, read aloud the names of the warnings that had been ignored, and promised to publish the progress of every correction. Even when the results embarrassed the corporation, Caldwell compensated employees who had suffered retaliation, created an independent reporting line, and began verifying staffing through building access data. Executive bonuses were no longer tied only to staffing reductions. A safety council made up of nurses, patients, and family members was established, along with outside monitoring for 2 years. Hannah's professional record was restored. During the hearing, one board member offered Hannah an executive position. She refused. A job cannot be a reward for telling the truth. Love cannot be a reward either. After an independent hiring process, Hannah accepted a clinical safety training position at another facility within the corporation. She did not report directly to Ethan. Ava continued working as a nurse and became the night shift safety representative. Walter joined the patient council. Margaret received a seat on the patient experience council. She required all materials to be available in audio formats and other accessible forms. She continued living independently, using her mobility cane and deciding for herself when she wanted assistance. Cassandra sent an apology for moving the cane and speaking on Margaret's behalf. Margaret accepted it but reminded her, "An apology has value only if you stop and ask first the next time." For 6 months, Ethan attended safety meetings without reporters. He listened while nurses described understaffed shifts, publicly released results that were still imperfect, and never pressured Hannah to forgive him. Their conversations slowly moved from corporate reform to family, and then to the fear of being used that both of them had carried. Only after Hannah saw that Ethan kept his promises when no cameras were present did she agree to have coffee with him beside Boston Harbor. Margaret sat at a nearby table and smiled when she heard their footsteps approaching. "I never chose a bride," she said. "I only showed my son the one person in the room who was kind when she did not know who we were." Ethan pulled out a chair but waited for Hannah to sit by herself. "Could we begin with one ordinary date? No security guards, no reporters, and no grand promises." Hannah studied him for a moment, then smiled. "Yes, but I choose the restaurant, and we divide the bill equally." "Agreed." When they left the cafe, Margaret heard Ethan's footsteps slow. He did not make Hannah walk behind him, and he did not move ahead expecting her to follow. For the first time, her son was walking beside another person. Margaret did not need to see an expensive car or the clothes they were wearing. She only needed to hear the respect in the distance between their footsteps. Because love does not begin when someone is selected as a reward. It begins when both people are free to choose, are given enough time to build trust, and move forward together on equal ground.